So with bachata, as the doors are opening, people start to gain an interest in it. And it wasn't until Luis Segura recorded Pena. I don't know if you've ever heard that song. It's a beautiful song. Look it up. Luis Segura Pena. But with that song, a lot of people kind of started to perk up their ears. They liked the sound. It was kind of interesting. It was different. The topics were very, very close to the human experience. They connected with that kind of pain and suffering and loving someone who didn't love you back and wanting a love that was impossible. Themes that I think majority of people at some point in their lives become familiar with. And as a result of that, bachata began to gain people's attention. Now, bachata caught a big break when the radio station Guachupita, Radio Guachupita, started to kind of allow for bachata to be played on the radio, something that before was an absolute no-no. Dominican merengue was kind of recognized as the national dance. Like, this is what we do as Dominicans. Bachata has no place. This is a lowly dance. But Radio Guachupita decided to start playing bachata, and people really started kind of listening to it. Now, mind you, even now, as people have moved from the rural areas into the city, playing bachata in your house was still very much looked down upon. If someone walked by your house and you're playing bachata, people would think you're a prostitute, or people would think you were a borracho, like someone who would be drunk all the time. So there was a lot of stigma associated with liking bachata, with dancing bachata, with even being around bachata due to its humble origins of being kind of a música de cabaret, like cabaret music or bar music or prostitution music. So all of that kind of started to change slowly. It became more and more accepted. And then something really important happened in the 1990s. In the 1990s, and it kind of started in the late 80s, but 1990s is when it really hit. You had something evolve called techno bachata. And techno bachata was bachata with more of an electric guitar sound, a little bit faster in speed. And now the topic, instead of it being all this pain and suffering, kind of turned a little bit more sensual, a little bit more sexy. It became about love. It became about desire. A lot of double entendres began to emerge. And bachata became a very interesting music to listen to. But that is not where the biggest shift happened. Here's where the big shift happened. In the 1990s, the amount in like the 80s had paved the way for a lot of migration of Dominicans to the United States, to New York specifically. They would move to New York, and this is kind of the struggle of the immigrant, which I'm very familiar with. But when you move to a brand new place where nothing is like what it used to be in your country, you develop a sense of nostalgia, like this desire to connect with the culture back home in any way possible. Food, dance, music, words, like everything gains new meaning when you're in a brand new place. So a lot of Dominicans that came to New York, including people like my mom and my uncle, they used to listen to bachata nonstop. They listened to bachata all the time. They listened to bachata, they listened to merengue more than they ever did when they were back home. And the reason for this is that they were hoping to connect. They were trying to recreate the memories, the sounds, the smells of home so that they could still feel connected to the place that they had left behind, but also to the family that they had left behind. In New York, because the culture is so different, there's so much less stigma. People did not care whether you listened to bachata or not. People weren't necessarily judging you because you were listening to bachata or not. So Dominicans that came to New York, they listened to bachata and they loved it, and it connected them back home. And they didn't feel like they were stigmatized or that people were judging them because they were listening to bachata. So with Dominicans kind of looking and yearning and having this desire to connect to anything from the mainland, and bachata being one of those things, artists caught a break. Artists like Anthony Santos, like Fran Reyes, like Raul Rodriguez. My mom used to go to a restaurant, a regular, super regular restaurant, super cheap, like super cheap restaurant just in Brooklyn, in the neighborhood, and watch Fran Reyes play for $15. Legitimately, entrance fee, $15, go see Fran Reyes. Like, same thing for artists like Anthony Santo and Raulín Rodriguez. Like, this was a time in which bachata was still brand new. It was coming up. It was barely being accepted. And these fantastic artists kind of just came and played with their band in New York and then went back home and played there. And slowly, over time, the Canenos will come back home and talk about their experiences and loving bachata and connecting to it, saying, no, it's okay, like, let loose, like, enjoy the dance, enjoy this beautiful music. So in the Dominican Republic, in the mainland, the music itself began to be more accepted. So now people are no longer so ashamed. People started to recognize bachata as a symbol of Dominican culture. That was a really big shift. And that was, I would say, one of the most drastic changes and one of the biggest stepping stones for bachata to get to where it is today. So as bachata became more accepted in the Dominican Republic, and these artists were actually able to produce records because people wanted that content, they wanted that bachata, there was a shift in the media in terms of acceptance. So now they were getting invited to TV shows. Now they were more relevant, so now they were on radio shows. Now they were producing albums, CDs at the time, cassettes, all of these different things. So that was really important as a stepping stone. Then, in early 2000s, something monumental happened again. In the 2000s, Aventura came out with the song Obsesión. If you do not know that song, then that is quite a surprise because that is one of the most popular bachata songs in all of bachata history. Now, what makes Aventura interesting is that they were kids who lived here in the United States from Dominican parents. So they grew up in many ways listening to bachata from their parents, but not necessarily being the ones that were seeking it out. And then they had the hip hop R&B culture of the United States because they had grown up here. So these kids decided to do something a little bit interesting. They decided to connect what they knew from their parents, that the traditional bachata sound, which they liked but weren't so connected to, and they decided to take that and mix it with the R&B, with the hip hop, with the electric guitar, like with more I guess younger sounds. And they sought to bring a new sound to bachata, and then they also sought to bring a new language to bachata, and that language was English. So that's what Aventura kind of did. They connected the old with the new, the old generation, my parents' generation, to my generation. Now, fun fact, with me, I grew up in a time when bachata was kind of the domain of Luis Vargas, Anthony Santos, Raulín Rodriguez, Zacarías Ferreira, Joe Veras, like Tu Camarón, and Luis Martinez. Like, these were the people that were kind of popular at the time when I was growing up. I didn't necessarily feel very connected to that music. I knew how to dance it. I had heard it all my life. I knew every single word, but I didn't feel connected. I didn't seek it out. At the time, Daddy Yankee was popping, so that's what I was listening to. I was listening to Gitro Amarillo. I was listening to Gasolina. Like, that is the kind of stuff that I was looking at. Like, that's what I was interested in. Don Omar, Pobre Diabla, todo eso. So that's where I was. However, when Aventura came into the scene with Obsesión and all these kind of songs that had an interesting vibe to them, that were kind of R&B-ish, that were kind of cool, that were kind of like incorporating that English aspect into the Spanish, that's when I started to become interested in bachata. That's when I was like, wait, like maybe I might want to look at this. And then, do you know, like something that was so new was actually my introduction to something that was so old in a more kind of passionate way. So I listened to Aventura and I fell in love with bachata. And I fell in love with Aventura's bachata, but more importantly, I fell in love with bachata as a genre, which then led me to go back to the other artists. So for a lot of people, that was the case as well. They started to connect with Dominican culture back home based off of this kind of new sound that spoke to who they were today, but at the same time gave them a little taste of what they used to be before, at least for my generation. So Aventura, yes, I firmly believe that they changed the game. They connected the young to the old in such a beautiful way that it still paid homage to the old, and they had beautiful lyrics, but at the same time they acknowledged that R&B and hip hopity feel of the young generation, and they added new sounds and they incorporated new beats, and it still had a little bit of the old with just enough of the new. Now, what ended up happening is over time, bachata has continued to evolve musically very quickly. Very, very quickly. It's a very young dance, it's a very young music style, but it has evolved very quickly. Bachata itself is still kind of trying to figure itself out in terms of the identity of the dance style. So it's unfortunate because what's happening is the dance itself is still evolving, and people are in the meantime turning into something that it's not. Look, you're gonna hate me for saying this, but I feel like in many ways bachata is being colonized by other styles, and I also feel like bachata is being colonized by a certain degree of whiteness. Hate me for saying that if you want, but there's just this connection. There's the missing link. This is where bachata comes from. Grounded, the people, firm, struggle, socioeconomic issues. Like that's bachata. And right now it's this kind of dance that is danced in a elevated way with lots of body rolling and head spins and pretty hands. Like that looks pretty, I'm sure, yes. But it's not quite the essence of bachata. It's not quite that feel of the campesino and the feeling, the music and the soulfulness and the African influences that it has. So with this kind of new transition, I do want to help promote, create some consciousness around the dance style and its origins and why certain things might not be fitting. Perfect example. If you're dancing to a song called Pobre Diablo, where he's talking about being a poor man with no possibilities who loves a woman who will never love him back due to his political, social, economic status, I do not think head rolling and body rolling and tangoing your way through that makes very much sense. Now, be as creative as you like. I'm just saying it kind of looks ridiculous. And I understand a lot of the kind of dancers will not necessarily be familiar with the Spanish language, which is okay. But there's a certain earthiness to a lot of the music that kind of touches on those themes about rape, themes about pain, things about lack of social acceptance, themes about poverty, themes about not knowing where the next meal is coming from. Like those kind of themes do not lend themselves very well to that kind of dancing. It just looks inappropriate. So I just want to help to create some consciousness around the way that the dance style is danced and how it has evolved and how we as dancers, I believe, have in many ways a responsibility to learn a dance properly, because so many people look at us dancers and see what they should be emulating. And what I do not want is for bachata to continue to propagate in a major way, but losing its tie entirely to its history. Like, yes, I want to see bachata prosper. I am beyond grateful and happy for all the people in the world who are disseminating this style. Like, it just fills me with so much joy to see something that was birthed in my motherland to go to Japan and to go to China and to go to Dubai, and for people to say, I love bachata and it's amazing and that's what I connect to and there's nothing like it and it has saved me and it's something that makes me so happy. I love that. I love that. It makes me so proud as a Dominican that people love something that was born in my country so much. And yet, I also want to make sure that it stays, at least in some ways, true to form. That if it's like, I get it, it's gonna evolve. All dances evolved, but we need to be aware of where that came from, so that when it does evolve, we still do recognize the root. We still pay homage to the root, because the struggle that was fought to make bachata possible, it's insane. It's crazy. A lot of people had to suffer in order to bring this dance style to life. And body rolling your way through an entire dance does not do that justice. So that's my piece. Some more videos will definitely be coming around. A little bit more of the history and a lot of anecdotes that I have from growing up and from my grandfather and his grandfather and from my father and just in general of the Dominican Republic. So I definitely hope you guys check for me, and I'll be in touch soon. Bye.